Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another session of Chat Time. Today, I'm very, very excited to have a chat to a veteran in the project world. He's been a consultant to several large organisations and across a variety of industries, including banking, university sector, and communications. While he has directly delivered projects and programs of work, the majority of his career has been spent providing guidance and governance to project delivery teams, ensuring they were able to achieve what was originally set out. Please welcome my guest, Murray Parsons. Hi, Murray. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Corinne. Nice to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about our chat today. So let's kick off. I would love to know, and so would the listeners, how you got started on this project journey. Are you like what I call myself, which is a accidental project manager, team member person?
I guess that's the case. I started out as a systems programmer many years ago at ANZ Bank on small systems like super minis, and so that's where I started my career. And after a few years doing that, was invited to work on a major transformation project of theirs, and that was my first introduction to any sort of formal project management. That came and went, and as a result, I ended up as the IT manager for the branch terminals that we put in around Australia, looking after that team that managed those. And that was, I guess, that was my time at ANZ. When I left there, I took on the IT manager role for Switzerland Insurance in Australia. So that was sort of operations, development, maintenance, telecommunications, and so forth. It was a CIO role, but for a small organisation. There was probably about 15 staff involved. So that was very broad. Okay, so not a lot of project management so far. After Switzerland Insurance, I went contracting and worked on a wide range of things, and started to get exposed to specific projects. But most of them, though, they were managed informally. So there was no, if you like, Prince 2 structures or PMBOK or anything like that around them. But projects happened. And I guess I became frustrated with how well they delivered or didn't. And I actually did a certification in IT quality management that took a couple of years, and covered methodology development and all sorts of things, Six Sigma, and touched on many things, methodology. And that got me really interested. So I worked as a quality manager on a number of projects, and that kind of led to methodology development, and that led to PMO management, which led to project portfolio management. And I guess that's where I spent the last 10 or more years at that level. So I have implemented a number of projects and programs directly over my time, but I kind of find the attractive spaces in the project portfolio management. And I might add, for all you PMs out there listening, it's a lot harder than delivering a specific project. That's my story anyway. So yeah, so that's where I've ended up, where I am now.
Fantastic. And actually, you've touched on a really important point. I know that there seems to be this battle between, whether you're delivering projects or whether you're the governance of projects, being the PMO, for example. And I guess in my experience, I've actually worked in both, but I'd like to think that we're all working towards the same cause. But the fact that you've actually delivered projects and then you've been on the other side, helping to govern and make sure we're setting up structures, what have been some of your experiences in terms of how people respond to the governance that you're putting in place, or the structures that you're trying to implement?
Yeah, look, I would say a couple of things there. That a lot of...
You have to be kind, Murray. We have to be kind.
I know. No, I'll be kind. I think a lot of project managers don't actually understand portfolio management. So that's where you need to, the big difference is you need to understand the state of play for maybe 20, 30, 50, 100 projects at a time. And that means that there's the information you require to some project managers seems additional to what they would normally need to provide, or that they would personally need to manage their single project. It also means that you typically want it in a standard format across all those projects, and we know that project managers like to do things their own way, and so they're the sorts of challenges that you face there. So it goes a long way to if you end up in the portfolio management space, and I'd say there's actually more than just governance involved in that. Some PMOs, if you like, where they're in that role, are delivery-based PMOs, and I've run one of those at ANZ Bank, where I guess I was governing, but I was responsible for delivery of a suite of maybe 30 or so projects on a rolling basis, and some are quite different and only involved in the governance of what's going on. So observing, investigating, hopefully seeing early warning indicators for projects and helping them fix issues that might be happening behind the scenes, and will shortly expose themselves. And the longer these things bubble away, the worse they are typically when they do expose themselves. So this is the kind of differences that I would see there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can just imagine, based on some of the experiences you already raised in terms of helping ANZ, back in the telemachine days and the things that they were doing. I mean, you would have seen so many changes. I'd love to know what, in all of your experience, whether it be as a programmer or whether it's in PMO, for example, what were your highs and your lows, or maybe a couple of them? You probably had heaps of both.
Look, there are. I just and I just jotted down a high and a low. I could reflect maybe on more at some point in the future. But so back in I actually had two goes at ANZ. The first 6 years after leaving university with my Bachelor of Science, polished up. Thought I was pretty clever. And then many years later, went back there on a contract, did a couple of contracts, ended up rejoining there full time, and I was there for about a 9-year stint before I moved into the university.
Short contracts.
Yeah. Oh no, there was a couple of contracts, and then I joined them full time, and that overall was 9 years, and worked in a couple of different areas there, and that's where I guess did my first portfolio management, but that was second stint, and things had changed an awful lot, for sure, in terms of the maturity of the way projects were run, and what general managers and executive general managers were looking for in terms of the performance of their portfolios of projects. But I picked out one from, it was the first big project that I worked on. It was an ANZ, it was a transformation project, and it had about 90 people on it, and it took ANZ from, it was a mainframe-based project. It took ANZ from being a batch processor on Honeywell mainframes to being an online processor on IBM mainframes, and with branch terminals rolled out into however many, I think it was 1,100 branches around Australia. And that was, it also involved interchange of information between the two mainframes and a whole lot of other things. But that project was, the first phase of that, which was the Ringwood area and all the branches in the Ringwood area, was completed in 9 months from start to finish.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I look back on it fondly, and no doubt it becomes even more successful as I grow older, and that we did more in less time. But that's actually the what happened, and the project team was very dynamic and actually using, as I reflect on it, agile techniques, even though the manifesto was probably a couple of decades from being struck and written. So it was a very, very successful project, and I guess a lot of that was based on the individuals that worked together as a team. It was pretty impressive stuff.
So tell me, like on that particular experience, I'm curious to know what you mentioned that it's actually probably the individuals that made it so successful.
Yes.
What was it about those individuals that did make it successful? Was it their leadership? Was it their structure? What was it from your perspective?
Depending on the level of the individual. So certainly the leadership was was excellent, and the team. So that was great. Then the team members who needed to follow the leader, obviously, all pulled together and formed. There was very little ego involved. There was incredible collaboration. We actually had an on-site. So we were sitting in a bunker in South Yarra at ANZ's IT headquarters, but we actually had senior bank managers and accountants and tellers and so forth from a branch were integrated into our team, a very agile concept. So they worked with us on a day-to-day basis as we did this stuff. So the fact that there was the leadership and the clear vision of what the project was all about, and then the way the people pulled together in the respective team, whether it was the terminal team, the branch controller team, mainframe team, document reader team, comms teams, all that, but all at the individual team level pulled together, and then at the overall project or program level pulled together and were worked in a highly collaborative, egoless way, and that's what I would say was fundamental to our success.
And you know, I mean, people don't realise how valuable it is to have all, like, as many of the stakeholders that you need to work with collaborate together, because it really does bring down walls. Everybody starts to understand somebody else's pain point on the other side of the fence that you may not necessarily have ever appreciated. And it does. And it creates that sense of camaraderie, you know, where everybody wants to work together, wants to succeed together, wants to help each other too. So
very true.
I mean, as I say,
you know, things like methodologies and tool sets and, you know, schedulers or whatever it might be, they don't deliver projects, people do. So good people is if someone said, would you like good people or good methodology to work with, I'll take the good people.
Absolutely, because good people will probably learn the good methodologies anyway. So
they do, and that's what happened. That stuff all got built along the way very quickly and without egos, and then people would just work to the way we said we would work, and delivered. So it was very good. That was certainly a high.
I think we all need one of those high highs just to reflect back on when things are not so good. So tell me about one of those not so good times.
Yeah, so a low was that I'm not sure if the bureau still exists, but so I won't name the bureau, but it was a payroll processing bureau, and it was actually, I guess, given to a big consultancy at the time, who I also won't mention their name, but to manage and to implement. It was similar size. It was a number of teams as part of this large project, large number of people, but it ended up being cancelled partway along after probably a year or so, maybe 2 years actually. I left after about a year, 18 months. And it was cancelled. Everything, people were told on the there's a meeting at 4 o'clock, and some went to the left and some went to the right, and the ones that went to the left were held for a while, employed for a while, and the ones that went the other way left the building. All the machines were turned off, all the documentation was put in a locked room, and the customer thought about it for a while. So that was a low, particularly for those who left on that day, not of their own accord. And I guess there were differences there to the high. There were good people, but there was certainly infighting and maybe a lack of clarity as to how things. Well, of the vision, you know, ultimately it was a new, totally redeveloped bureau payroll processing system. But below that, there was quite a bit of a gap, and not the sort of collaboration between the different teams, and lots of technical issues that the project suffered from, and so it ended up getting cancelled after spending lots and lots of money without delivering anything.
Yeah, and I mean that sounds like such a terrible and such a great shame because
Mm,
I'm sure that they probably well they obviously started off with a really clear vision and really what they wanted
yep.
to do, and there are obviously lots of benefits. But and in your opinion, what do you think caused it to go wrong? You know, like I mean, I know you said that there was the infighting,
Mm.
but what even allows that sort of situation to occur to begin with? You know, and is it sounds like it would have been the leadership, but I'm sure there is more to that. And did that
Yeah,
sort of pave the way to you wanting to do governance?
yeah. Well, it did, and there was probably, there was a number of, I think there was probably a number of factors, but um, one of them was I guess translating the ultimate vision down into manageable development packages, if you like, or outcomes or outputs. And so things kind of got lost along the way. People were working very hard, but not necessarily all pulling in the same direction. And a lot of that was not necessarily intentional, but there was just that lack of clarity from the ultimate vision, I suppose, of a new bureau payroll product down to what does that look like? How will it operate? What's the best platform to implement it on? A 4GL was selected, and we did some modelling, and it ended up we thought that it was just going to run too slow to actually fit into the batch processing window on a nightly basis. That was one of the terrible parts of the project along the way, thinking that the performance just wasn't going to be there. So I think it was really translating that vision down into the actionable pieces for the teams to work together to deliver. And probably at the inter-team level, there was arguing going on about how they should, what a particular team should do and how that part should work, like the control systems versus the actual application itself. So it didn't all pull together very well. I remember we got a consultant in to try and build the teamwork up, and that was a very interesting couple of days because there were some very interesting conversations had, but it didn't necessarily lead. It wasn't a silver bullet that was going to fix all the problems. So sad but true.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Mm,
shame, and we've probably all heard about. I don't know that I've actually ever been on a project that's totally been canned, but it's certainly
mm,
been back to the point where it almost felt like it was, and it's just so demoralising. Obviously, it's an expensive exercise, but it's very demoralising for everybody involved. And then
yeah.
people take that bad experience to their next projects, and you can understand why people start off projects with a negative sentiment. They don't want to provide, or they expect the worst from people at times too,
Yep.
when they've had those sorts of sour experiences too.
Well, I guess sometimes projects are, and it's the wrong way to do it, projects are done to people rather than done with people.
Yeah.
And people that have had that experience, and it comes under other guises such as the dead cat thrown over the fence kind of syndrome, and people that have suffered those styles of projects, start from a fairly negative base, I guess. Actually, I worked on another project that got cancelled, but it was cancelled as a result of a report that I did, and so to me that was a success because
Okay.
it was spinning its wheels, and I was asked to do a deep dive into why it was and why it wasn't actually progressing. It had reached a point, it was 80% done, but not ready to roll out. But it wasn't getting further along the progress, and so I actually did look into that and came to the conclusion that that's what was going to continue happening. And I had my facts and theories and so on and so forth, and put the report together and recommended that they cancel the project. And much to my surprise, they did, because they're very hard things to do with someone that's invested a lot of time and money and effort into a system, saying, well, you should stop. It's not going to deliver what you wanted, or it's not going to be, it's not going to deliver at all. So yeah, that was kind of in between. It was a failed project, but it was a success in the fact that we didn't keep trying to push it and turn it into a success, because it wasn't going to happen.
Absolutely. I think sometimes you just need to know when when you need to cut your losses. And
Yep.
I'm sure you probably may not have been the most popular guy in the room, but when everybody looks at that, and especially if you have the facts and figures, you've done the research,
Yep.
sometimes, and for the person who's really attached, it's an emotional attachment and it sort of lends itself to what you were saying before about project managers sometimes just running off and just wanting to do things their own way, because it feels like that ownership, I want to be able to prove myself in some shape, way or form. And it's probably why some people, there are probably more projects which should be cancelled but are not for exactly that reason, but emotionally it becomes harder for people to stop it.
Yeah, and the politics, people think it's a bad face, but a well-stopped project is a very successful outcome. If you shouldn't be doing it for whatever reason, and it might be so here's just anecdotally a difference between portfolio management and project management. So you might have a project that's racing along and it's running perfectly, it's to budget, it's delivering what it's going to deliver and so forth. From the project management level, why would you stop it, right? Because it's going to deliver what was defined and what was wanted at the time. From a portfolio management, there might be good reasons. You need the money for a higher priority project that's come along, or your organisation is going down a different strategic path, and what's being delivered will no longer be relevant to that company anymore. And so you stop it, and that's a very successful thing to do. But there's lots of emotion and there's lots of potentially politics involved in stopping a project. But it's there should be more that are stopped. Submarine deals, for instance, and
yes, definitely.
Buying other defence force infrastructure, very expensive.
Oh yes, don't even get me started. That's a whole different chat, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's for another time. You can edit that bit out if you like.
It is. No, so Murray, in your experience, I guess I'd love to hear, and the theme that we're really centered around here is around delivery. I'd love to hear some of your anecdotes, as you mentioned, and some of your experiences, having come from the governance phase. What would your guidance be to project managers who perhaps don't see it from your lens, and give them an insight as to what it is that you're looking for, or what a program manager or a portfolio manager is looking for?
Okay, so I suppose it kind of relates to when you're governing or delivering a whole swag of projects, and I'm talking, as I say, up into the 30 plus. It's really about taking the emotion out of those, because people are very invested in their individual projects, and so they should be. But if you're looking at an overall situation for a large number of projects, what you want to do is take the emotion out and deal with, if you like, facts. So, deal with factual information. So for me, and I guess, and we're jumping into, I sense, there's a lot of opportunities to raise the quality of delivery, if you like, along the way, and that can be things like sponsorship, team structure, gating, etc., etc. And these are things that PMO people, methodology people, project portfolio management people deal with and see. But where I ended up was around the if I call it status reality. So where are all of the projects in the portfolio that I'm governing or interested in? Where are they actually all at? And so for the project manager at that level, it's taking the emotion and the conversation, if you like, out of them describing where their project is at, and presenting something that's maybe factual and not particularly, if you like, personable. I'm a great believer in minimising text in status reports, because typically, if I take my cynical view, which often I do, the more text I see, the more I'm likely to have a good look at the project. Because why are they telling me all this stuff rather than just giving me a milestone report? Because that tells me maybe tells me what I want to know. So it's around presenting that for the project manager, the way they present that to me if I'm doing project portfolio management, and for the portfolio manager, it's receiving these things so that they can understand where their 30, 40, 50, 100 projects are at, without having to be down in the bowels of each and every project. So that's, I guess, what I was going to talk about a little bit here, and maybe how you might do that very simply.
I would love to hear it. Absolutely, fire away.
Okay, so mindful. We've all heard of. We all do our RAID management, and so we know about all that sort of stuff, and that's often you know, a lot of what's in a status report, what's in a project status, or of people's concerns. The way I look at projects is there's 4 primary dimensions, okay, aspects to it, and that's time, cost, scope, and benefits, right? So these are what I call the primaries, or the, if you like, the hard dimensions of a project. And benefits, you know, there's a little asterisk on that. For most projects, they're planned benefits, because you don't realise those until the project outputs or outcomes go into production, and then you start to you start to realise those benefits. But they're the hard quantified dimensions. There's lots of other ones like risk, change, stakeholder engagement, assumptions, constraints, etc., etc. They're all what I'd call secondary dimensions. They can be lead indicators of things happening, and often are, but you can run a project that's carrying a lot of risk and maybe change and deliver it very successfully. So they're not the core dimensions. They're things to be aware of, and they might lead to changes in your primaries. So primaries: time, cost, scope, and your benefits, right? And they are what give you your status reality in the end of the day. Okay, so how might we do that? Here's some, if you like, some steps as a project manager or a project participant might take. And I'm going to assume that that the high level goals or the outcomes that are being sought have already been defined. So, you know, you've kind of got that that level of definition of your project. So first thing you should do is a stakeholder analysis. Okay? You need to know who's involved. That's really, really important at a couple of levels. From the governance perspective, anyone who is a stakeholder should understand who is representing them on their project board. Okay, and a lot of failed projects are ones where IT say, we can just do this, you know, we know what's required. And I've had this said to me, look, it's about this is about the network, or this is about whatever. This is internal, you know, we don't need anything from the people who are going to consume what we're producing. And it doesn't work, you know. So you need to do your impact analysis, okay, and understand who's involved. And that'll include your users. It'll include people like from architecture. It might include help desk leads and participants and so forth. Got to have all of those, and each one of those should know who's representing them on the project board. Because if they're not being represented, trouble's coming. All right. Okay. Now, because now you've got your stakeholders identified, you can define your scope, because the stakeholders who do that, for instance, the help desk, you know, the users will have functional needs, but the help desk might have needs for new help desk scripts, so forth, right? Architecture or applications might be maintenance guides or the like, right? So they can maintain the application. So now that you know those people, you can define your scope of what you're actually going to deliver. And what you do with that is link the delivery of your scope to your project's milestones. So a milestone is a reflection of one or more key deliverables. Okay, simple as that. So not concerned at the activity level. If you say you've hit this milestone, then I know you should have developed and had approved by the appropriate people the deliverables that define that milestone. And it might be, you know, a project management thing like a project brief or a business case, or it might actually be, you know, a test strategy or a test script, or particularly if you're doing agile, it might be a tranche of functionality or whatever it might be. But you know, if you hit this you only hit this milestone if these things are present and have all been approved, right?
Yeah. And you're talking about it from a governance lens, because obviously the project manager will want to know all those sorts of things because that's critical to the team that they're leading. But from a governance perspective and from a leadership perhaps perspective, they're not going to be caring about the level of detail, as you said, because they're making that assumption that all these other things are this milestone is a byproduct of all these other checklists being ticked off, essentially.
I suppose, I mean, a schedule or a plan needs to have this will sound a bit odd, but it needs to have the level of detail in it that you actually need to have in it. So for a small, simple project that you, the type of which you've done many times, needs a lot less definition than something that's new to the organisation. It's large, complex, got a lot of touch points, interfaces, stakeholders, and so forth. So you define it to that level. But as the project manager, you know, I'm hopefully got a good relationship with my team, and I'm doing all the right things, and I might be doing stand-ups or however it is that I'm actually managing that group. But in the end of the day, what I want to know, and you might be using cards on walls, right? But I want to know, have these things been delivered or not? And have they been completed? And if they're the right ones are completed, then I know I've hit milestone X, which might be the end of the define phase, it might be the end of tranche 3, it might be whatever. So I guess it's my belief that I want to know those things first and less about what activities you've been up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to know. And large projects and large construction projects like, you know, tunnels and train station redevelopments and things like that have you know, multi-thousand line schedules, but they've also got a team of schedulers that maintain all of that. Yes. But if I build it back, I mean, what does the Premier want to know, or what does the head of the level crossing removal authority want to know?
Yeah,
they want to know at a much higher level of, have I reached this milestone? And, you know, have we signed off the design of what that particular level crossing removal is going to look like? Is it going to be a dig? Is it going to be an overhead, and so forth? Lots of activities beneath it, but they want to know that. So the project manager, there's quite a bit of commonality, I think, there.
I think, I know in my experience, it really does depend on the kind of team relationship you have. Yep. You know, if you've not worked with this team before, you don't know how they work, and you still have that level of, you need to understand the quality, you need to make sure some things are being delivered to the quality that's being committed to. Then I think it's much more imperative, until you know how your team works and how you work together, then it's much more imperative. And it's not sort of, you know, move this paper from here to there. It's not that level of detail, of course, but perhaps the milestone that we're talking about would be, in my opinion, lower down until you get to have that relationship with the team, because you haven't, it's not to say that you don't trust them from the onset, but you haven't developed that working relationship, and that therefore that trust that comes with knowing and having that assurance that when you say it's done, I know that means it's completely done, you know, as opposed to that the developer done. Have you heard the term before? Is it done, or is it done? But
they don't say it's done. It's the person receiving, reviewing, and that's where the quality review comes in, from the recipient. So they receive it, they review it, and they say if it's done.
Absolutely, I
agree. So there are, but I get what you're saying. You need to establish your you know, your project, I guess, style, and that includes not levels of trust, but level of scrutiny, if you like. So in an ideal working relationship, you give responsible people an outcome, which might be a deliverable for them, and then you let them go away and do it. And how they plan it and execute and deliver it is more up to them. Providing they do it, you know, they know that they've got 3 weeks, this much money, and these team members to work with. But what you're looking for is the prototype interface for the XYZ application, and they deliver it in that time the way that they choose to. So it brings it back.
And it's that level of accountability too.
It is, absolutely, and that brings it back to, I'm not so concerned about the exact activities you're doing, but I'm concerned about what you're producing. To a level of quality which involves the recipients and so forth. rather than what did you do yesterday? I thought you were meant to do that last week. No, we've shuffled the schedule around and everything. The point is it still on track? Will I still get my my signed off prototype user interface? Yes, you will. Not a problem. Is a good place to be. And if you take this approach of the link of the deliverables linked to the milestones, you're actually integrating, because milestones have got dates on them. We know that. And if you go forward and do a little bit of costing, you've actually integrated your time, scope, cost, and stakeholders, and probably validated the claimed or planned benefits, all in one simple action, right? Yeah. And so now there's this integration of reality, I guess, that that as a project manager you're able to provide, and as a portfolio manager you feel happy about, looking at your dashboard, whatever it might be, and drilling down into a project and seeing that is actually where it's at, rather than reading a whole lot of text for someone telling you what they did last week. I did these things, good-o. What I'm going to do next week, good-o. But, does that give me comfort of where we're at? Have you got all the resources you need? Are things coming out at the right time? Are the stakeholders engaged? Because they're the ones that look at the delivered products and sign them off and everything. Going back to the method I'm suggesting, you actually integrate all those things very very simply, and it's you get to that stage of where you're showing people where you're at rather than telling them. So you can demonstrate this is where we are in the project, rather than telling them that. You can give them simple reports, which maybe you're producing using your Excel or whatever it might be, or if you're using a higher order kind of product, you might be pressing a button and it's it's spitting it out based on the facts of where things are at, your budget and your timeline and so forth. So for me, the tip for a project manager in terms of producing status reports that project boards, sponsors, project boards, portfolio boards and so forth will really like is, less text, more fact.
There you go.
We hit our milestone. What else do you want to know? We went out for coffee as well. That's good. Well, that might be something that's worth knowing, so that the team's in really good spirits because we've been out a couple of times. See, that I'd see as useful in a status report if the main part of it was milestones hit, missed, this sort of thing, cost planned versus actual. Have I spent the money that I said I would by now? And if not, you better be able to explain it, because maybe that's a lead indicator that you're going to run late because you haven't got the resources that you needed, or you haven't bought the equipment that they needed at that point in time. So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I totally agree, and I'm on the same page. As I've also seen lots of chunky text, and actually what that does is, as you say, it actually doubts people's position and the project team position, because you think it almost feels like a justification. Also, when there are several projects on the go, it actually makes it very time consuming to have to read all of those blurbs, for every single project. But I think but what's really important here is that to set that structure up from the very beginning, because a lot of what happens, or what I've seen in my experience, is project managers know that project status reports are just part and parcel of having, to deliver a project. Everybody knows you have to do it. It always seems to be an afterthought. And yet so many critical decisions are made based on it. And so that's why people don't think about structuring it to understand, what is it that we need to show? What are those milestones that I need to be able to present back? What are people expecting to see? And it lends itself to what you were saying before. If you understand who you need to speak to, who your stakeholders are, then you can understand what they need to see, because you're satisfying their scope, because they're essentially writing the scope for you, or with you. And then that way, that status report, you can easily make it a metric, as opposed to having to explain things. But I find that people explain things because they don't really know what the success criteria is. They don't actually know what they're being judged on necessarily, or the opposite, or it's because they're scared that they've missed the mark somehow, and it's a breakdown in communication.
Absolutely bang on. I mean, once again, linking the two together, and apologies to all you project managers out there, but I would say that
he's actually a nice guy, guys. Just see through some of the terms, but he's a nice guy.
But I would say, I think hopefully there's a lot of people that would agree with me that saying that as a project manager, one of the things, particularly where there's PMOs and governance and so forth involved, that can be a problem is understanding what those groups, if you like, the governance groups, what they are looking for from your project. Okay, yeah. Do I need a communication strategy as well as a comms plan? Do I, and it helps them, particularly for a contractor, it helps them understand, at this stage, they don't understand the way that particular company works, or that part of that company. So they're not really sure what to expect of them. They're good project managers. They know about, cost and time and all that sort of stuff. So imagine this scenario where they sit down with, let's say, someone from the PMO, so keep it simple. And the PMO says, well, this is the hybrid methodology we use based on some Agile and Prince 2. These are the phases, right? The end of each phase is a milestone. And for your project, because it's small and simple, or it's a medium one or a complex one, we've determined the sort of characteristics of your project. This is, from a project management perspective and governance, this is what we expect to see. So at the end of a concept phase, we just need a brief, and here's a template for it. At the end of analysis phase, we need these couple of things, and at the end of etc. The project managers then got their guidebook as to what they need from a governance perspective. Now, as they go through, and if they're doing change-based or issue-based delivery, they will work out with their user community or the sponsor what's going to be delivered along the way. So now the project manager has actually got certainty as to, over time, at these milestone points, what's expected of them. And there's no surprises like, they come up to end of design and the governance looks at them and said, where's your architectural impact statement? They go, I don't know, I didn't know I needed one. Well, of course you need one. Have you seen the architects? No, no one told me to. All that is eliminated. And for PMs and for different groups, it's not always architects, but typically architects, security, procurement, often get left out of their requirements. It gives them a map of, deliverable to milestone, which they can then go and use to cost and time schedule and resource their project. So it gives them that very, very sound basis. And now they know what they're doing. A lot of stress is relieved. And so when the two work together like that, it's actually, it's a very good thing.
I couldn't agree more. And it feels like we've come back, full circle to where we started, because we were talking about that great project that stood out to you being centered around collaboration and understanding and seeing other people's perspective. And that's really what we're talking about, really. Rather than seeing governance as they're out to get you or they make things difficult, if you actually work with them because they're just another one of your stakeholders, you actually understand what the success criteria is. You know how and if there is an issue of why you can't, then you talk through it, and it's a two-way conversation. But by working together and understanding what is expected from one another, we're much more likely to succeed.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And sort of a parting thinking there of as you were speaking about maybe a project board sitting, and so they're comfortable because this thing has been mapped out and they're getting their bits and pieces. And I wanted to say that obviously in a status report, if there are any issues or risks or whatever that you need to share, rather than those which you're just managing as part of your project, then you should share them with that board, and potentially the assurance, which is often done by the PMO, other governance people, should share that with them and make sure that they know if there is something that you expect of them, because one of their roles that's often not performed is, roadblock clearance, resource commitment, funding, right? Key decisions. And so, in RAID, I think is risks, issues, assumptions, and dependencies. Yes. RIDAC, the D is actually for decisions. And it's an absolute key one that should be in your report. So where a decision is made, are we going to implement incrementally, or are we going to implement big bang? That's not for the project manager to decide. They may have thoughts, but it's a decision that someone else has to make. Are we going to develop in this platform or that platform? And these decisions, as part of your RIDAC registering, should be called out and assigned to appropriate people. And you know, don't be shy about assigning something to the sponsor to do, right? To clear, we need this roadblock cleared. You know, we're getting different input from 2 different user groups. How is that going to be resolved? I can't resolve it. It's your organisation. You need to do that. And so that's, you know, their role is to help the project and the project manager, not beat up on them when they have a governance meeting.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think we could talk about this all day long because there are so many things that I could say and I want to say, but unfortunately we're a little bit out of time. So
yeah, that's my normal issue, babbling too much.
No, well, I think we're both passionate about the topic, and that's obviously why. So, but thank you so very much, Murray, for sharing your time with me and your wisdom, your experience, and I guess I hope that project managers and project teams who are watching understand that governance are not out to get you, you know, but on the flip side, project managers are, you know, also not trying to go against governance. I think the equilibrium is really where we work together to help each other succeed. You know, we use each other to identify those risks, and then we can work through them together. And sometimes, you know, as you say, project managers' roles are not necessarily to always make the decisions. They're actually, their fundamental role is actually to raise any areas of concern and obstacles where we're going to not achieve those commitments. So
that's right.
I hope that's what everybody else is taking from this segment too. But thank you again for all of your insights, and I look forward to maybe we can have a phase 2, have another conversation, because I'm sure there's lots to share.
There are lots of topics and you know, a few fundamentals that if you get right, you'll have a much happier project manager and team and governance group, and the happiness should be shared and go together. So you know, there's a couple of tips in there that if you follow those, and they're pretty simple, then you'll alleviate a bit of stress for you as a project team.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Thank you so much again, Murray, and look forward to speaking to you soon.